Welcome friends once again to the NPTEL module on strategic trade and protectionism, theories and empirics. We are now on the 7th week of the module, and where we have been discussing the 32nd lecture on the types of non-tariff barriers. Since this is the most prevalent restrictions or the barriers among the member countries, its specific attention is very essential to be discussed in the classroom. So, since the whole module is framed on protectionism, so we are emphasizing largely on each type of barriers as part of the non-tariff restrictions. So, let us unfold the discussion. Here we go as with a structure. The structure is morely confined to non-tariff barriers. Also, we have added here customs unions, though we are going to take off this part in the next week. Customs union, role of WTO, regionalism, multilateralism, groupism. So, those aspects will be emphasized in the next week. Now, we are only sticking to these aspects, only sticking to this side of the discussion, though these are connected. Now, let us understand what are the types broadly. In the last week, we discussed types of tariff barriers and its effect on countries' development or countries' growth. There are in terms of welfare gain or less losses, those aspects we have discussed. Now, this week in the first two lectures we have or in the very first lecture, 31st lecture, we discussed what are the latest facts and figures of tariff, especially non-tariff barriers. Facts and figures, those are collected either from UNCTAD report, very latest report we discussed in the last lecture, by product, by countries, by exact sector, and by HS classification. Even we also discussed many other databases which talk about non-tariff barriers. Here we are emphasizing on non-tariff barriers by different types. So let us start with the most important non-tariff barriers as part of the theory is discussed with import tariff, import quota. Tariff we have already discussed. So, import quota. So, first point here is import quota. Now, now followed by import quota again, what exactly we are going to look at. Our next lecture is identifying the exact implications of import quota. How much it has impacts on the country's welfare will be discussed in the next lecture, but here we are emphasizing different types and their practice as under WTO. Now, quota one line, very short line is written that direct, it has direct consequences, it has direct restriction, quantity restriction. More effectively, if shifting demand, then quota can be understood very clearly. And also there are certain inefficiencies in the distribution of permits. If the quota restrictions, we will discuss this, if quota is actually auctioned off or permits are not given correctly, then it might dilute. So, we will discuss. Then export subsidy, we are actually giving subsidies to the exporters to facilitate trade, to reduce the international price, to make our product competitive. Many countries try their best to facilitate in terms of exports. Another content here, it is written VER. VER stands for voluntary export restraints. Voluntary export restraints where and there are other important aspects like technical administration related regulations. So, besides that we also talk about dumping, China used to practice dumping in the international market, especially in the Indian market. We will also discuss this. Besides that, there are many other forms of non-tariff barriers should be emphasized. So, this part we are not discussing right now, we will be taking off in our next week lecture while we discuss international trade agreements. Now, as a part of introduction, though we have already discussed the framework, non-tariff measures include a diverse array of policy measures which serve different purposes. So, it has diversity in terms of implementation. Among the various types of non-tariff measures, technical barriers, especially we will talk about TBTs, are most prevalent, and in the majority of the international trade is actually regulated by some form of the technical barriers. Like since all the trades that take place among the member countries are attached with many technical features. So, like bundling or like specifications, like administrative rules, regulations, like product features, qualities, in various forms the technicalities are attached. Now, since technicalities are very diverse in nature and it is very difficult to define a harmonized pattern of technicalities. So, therefore, each member country while in trade may take the advantage of citing their own standards. So, therefore, this is very much prevalent in the present day's trade. So far as quantity and price control measures are covered as part of non-tariff measures, these two cover much smaller, but still significant and so far as share of world trade is concerned. So, therefore, these two are also considered. Another component, as we have already emphasized from the framework, that export measures also play a significant part of the world trade. While we talk about the data on non-trade measures, NTMs, which is still very fragmentary and does not allow computation of comparative statistics across countries. So it is very difficult to map the exact practices across the country. Although the data, as I just mentioned, may not be fully representative of the world trade, whichever the data we talk about from any country, since there are various standards attached, various specifications attached, various features attached, various technicalities attached. So, uniform pattern of tariffs or uniform standards is very difficult to define. So, whichever the database we refer may not be fully representative. It might be context, I mean it is very contextual and refer to the particular situation. So, some preliminary statistics can be derived from the available data like trends or trends of the database which we have discussed in the last lecture. Now, the prevalence of various types of non-tariff measures actually differs by economic sectors. Based on the economic sectors, these prevalence are also different, as I just discussed. Sector related to like agriculture actually tend to be regulated by majorly in the present days by sanitary and phytosanitary measures and or export related measures. Basically, exports subsidies are largely given in this particular sector, and many countries restrict due to the standards in terms of SPS barrier, I mean SPS categories. Whereas, technical barriers to trade TBTs are also used to regulate most economic sectors in the present days. As I mentioned, quantity and price is still prevalent and also used frequently by smaller percentage in the trade basket. Now, so far we discussed the background why NTM is necessary and why it is necessary to discuss in the trade discussion. Now, if we do not count the exact facts, though we have discussed in the last lecture, but not in detail, specifically for NTM, non-tariff measures. So, let us have a look at it, and this is the source from UNCTAD Secretariat calculation using UNCTAD trans data. So, the trans data is used, this is most authentic source to understand the trade related restrictions. Now, here we go emphasizing the NTM in the world trade. Look at here. Now, this is coverage ratio, and frequency index is highlighted in the deep color, where I mean in the present days till the latest period, I think this is the period referred to 2017 data, where these are divided by the broad classification. On the left panel we are discussing world trade and not by sectors, but in the right panel we are emphasizing by sectors. So far as technical barriers to trade is concerned, this carries highest coverage in the present days out of the total non-tariff measures. Now, here we are mentioning SPS, TBTs, price control, quantity control, finance related support to export, export related support directly, or any other type of barriers like countervailing duties, like specification related restrictions, like admin restrictions. There are various other ways to discuss. Now, here TBTs as a whole actually captures the highest, followed by export promotion and SPS. These three are the major component. Now, look at the right hand panel. In my right here we are emphasizing by sector all those components within agriculture or within manufacturing or natural resources. Now, it is observed from the data that these two components are highest within agriculture. Then around, look at around 80%, 60 to 80% restrictions are made in the agriculture sector. Whereas similarly, in order to protect the natural resources also, many countries practice restricting through through TBT channel, technical barriers to trade channel. Now, we will emphasize here now in order to interpret this, as I just said, international trade is highly regulated through the imposition of TBTs, which is consisting of more than 30% of the product lines. Here it is the figure. TBTs, so far as frequency is concerned, more than 30%, in the product lines, and almost 70% of the world affected, 70% of the world affected due to these TBTs. Okay. Now, so far as price control measures are concerned, nearly 20% of the world trade, price control around 20% of the world trade, but it is less than 20%, and whereas export measures is slightly higher than the price control. Measures are frequently applied to international trade, still their use is largely related to agriculture sector. Now, export measures are again here is the export measure in agriculture sector, it is highest. We are saying export measure is second highest, it is actually due to agriculture sector, all right. And most of the world agricultural trade subject to the imposition of TBTs and SPS, especially in agriculture sector, we just explained. Now, these are the important interpretation of different protections as per the latest data. Now, what are the types? We have already discussed import quota. It is directly on the quantity imported to the country within a given specified period. Usually 1 year is referred, but maybe sometimes it is quarterly, sometimes it is half yearly. So, similar tariff quota, import quota and tariff quota. Tariff quota is a combination of tariff and quota. So, certain percentage of tariff and certain percentage of quota. Technical standards we will discuss in a short while. Similarly, anti-dumping duty, countervailing duty basically against subsidies on the productions or exports, license requirements, custom valuations, classification procedure are broad classification of types. Now, let us explain it one by one. We have certain confusions on different types by which are called defense measures, which are called non-tariff restrictions or barriers. I feel there are 4 broad categories in the definition of WTO, World Trade Organization, where they categorically defined which are called defense measures. The country actually or the WTO rules and regulations enforced in a manner to defend or create certain measures to defend the country's trade. They are like anti-circumvention, anti-dumping, anti-subsidy and safeguard measures. These are just anti-circumvention, circumvention basically related to the product lines which are actually copied or product lines which are followed, which are just slightly changed without actually protecting the original innovator. So, anti-circumvention laws are effective in protecting those cases. Similarly, anti-dumping basically the prices which are differentiated in different countries or in different markets are controlled by anti-dumping measures. Anti-subsidy are the subsidies given to different sectors. If few subsidies are given, usually it has been argued by many developing countries in different WTO framework to restrict the extent of subsidies provided by United States to their agriculture sector, by which their agriculture sector has been defined as the sector which that is more competitive in the international market. Now, similarly, various other forms of safeguarding procedures are followed as per the laws of WTO. Now, another part is called tariff changes. If the tariff percentage are also changes, are also part of restrictions. Instead of maintaining the tariff, we are changing frequently, it is also creating lots of trouble. Now, what are the non-tariff barriers? Broadly we have discussed, but we will emphasize the important aspects. Import controls, state aid related subsidies. So, therefore, anti-subsidy laws are framed. There are certain rules which regulate the maximum amount of subsidies should be given. Public procurement policy, you cannot just procure whatever we want, so that in future it may deter the extent of market, and thereby in certain other period the market can able to take advantage in terms of prices and to restrict trade. Similarly, localization policy, localizing any product and what kind of facilitations are provided is also important. Capital controls and exchange rate policy, export controls and other instruments like TBTs and SPS will be discussed. So, the use of trade defense measures not tariff barriers remained strong in 2017 with around 300 new investigations started at the WTO. So, 300 new investigations started because of the trade defense related measures undertaken by WTO. So, and cumulatively there were more than 1500 instances over the time, especially in 2017 it was 300. Over the time more than 1500 instances where trade involves defense measures. So, till the date 2017 those instances are in effect actually. During the last decade, developing countries have become increasingly more active in practicing defense related measures, which we have already discussed. So, what are the different defense in reality from 2005 to 2017 over this period as per the UNCTAD data source and their calculation. We are just referring to understand the differences. Now, here it is mentioned as the the color which is more deep is for the developing countries, and the lighter color are for the developed countries. Now, so far as trade defense measures are concerned, now you can understand this very clearly, this gap as compared to this gap. So, developing countries practice more defense measures. Initially it was little lesser. Now, I mean, if the rate of change is compared, the rate of change in the developing countries is very high, whereas in developed country it is by percentage lesser. Now, here we are mentioning cases with measures in force. So, around 1500 plus, here it is written 1500 plus cases have been noted in 27, I mean till 2017. These are all in cumulative figures. Now, if you look at trade defense investigations made now for I mean still it is more than 200 in 2017 by the developing countries, and for the developed country it is of around another 100. So, developing countries investigations are more, I mean more than double than that of the developed countries investigation related to trade defense measures. Now, what about trade defense measures in effect by country, which can easily be understood from the map. This map is again made by UNCTAD. Now, that I mean the magnitude of the color or the the color and it depth defines the extent of NTM in practice. As we have already mentioned in the earlier lecture, based on the facts and figures, that US imposes around 800 tariff measures which are followed by India. So, therefore, these two countries are actually highlighted with the highest percentage of tariff measures taken. So, very active is highlighted in the deepmost color, with more than 200 cases are observed in these two countries, whereas the second highest are observed in other part of the countries, 100 to 200 with the color identifies this, whereas here Russia and these part of the country are actually having lesser imposition so far as NTM is concerned. Now, whereas trade defense measures in effect is concerned, as per the 2017 data, very frequently targeted by China. Now, China takes huge numbers of trade defense measures. So, trade defense measures like here followed by India, I mean here China or parts of European countries, then followed by US and in India. So, these are the data from WTO ITIP data which I already discussed. Now, so trade defense measures in effect are discussed, and which is actually important for discussion for all of us, because of the fact that trade defense measures are largely practiced by China. I think this gives very good picture in understanding non-tariff barriers. As I already discussed, various types of non-tariff measures. Out of that, import controls carries huge percentage in practice. Out of that import control measures, there are around 7 or 8 indicators which are very important. 9 indicators here mentioned. Out of that, there are import bans, import incentives, import licensing related requirements, and import monitoring. Import quota we will be emphasizing with the help of diagrams and its effect in the next class. And import tariff quota, where tariff as well as import both are in practice, a combined tax, not just tariff individually, both are taken together. Then import related measures. Now, import related measures, where we will be emphasizing on the facts related to certain import related measures. Then besides that, we will also discuss internal taxation of imports. So, and trade balancing measures, then trade payment measures. So, among all those different 9 indicators, we will be emphasizing majorly on import quota with diagram that will clarify the discussion related to import quota, import controls. Similarly, there are another other indicators out of the state aid and subsidies, as we already discussed. Subsidies may be in kind, may be subsidies through financial grant, and generally financial assistance are provided in the production process, which has been largely debated in WTO negotiations, like interest payment subsidies to the loan grantee, especially for production related subsidies, and state aid, NES, state loans, tax or social insurance reliefs, etc., are also given simultaneously for making the products very competitive. Now, look at public procurement policies I mentioned as part of the NTM measures. Those might be public procurement access, and maybe of localization of the procurement, and similarly of procurement preference margin. The margin preference can be changed, that will also restrict trade. Now, so far as localization policy is concerned, as I mentioned that it facilitates local operations, local sourcing, and localization incentives to localize the domestic products in the international market. For example, a country can facilitate the importer to localize the product of another country. So, in that case, that will be actually countervailing the duties, the countervailing the trade patterns. Similarly, so far as capital controls and exchange rate policies are concerned, it is related to like checking with price stabilization, also checking with competitive depreciation, if there is any strategies taken by the member countries. So far as some other technical restrictions are concerned, as I mentioned repeatedly, SPS and TBTs carry the huge percentage, as we already verified. Now, which are the product lines by sector, we can explain for the year 2017, which are the segment having highest amount of SPS or TBTs. Here the figure says that let me read out. Animal, first was animal products, vegetable products, oil and related fats, food products. These 4, food, oil and fats, vegetable and animal products, actually carry highest amount of SPS related measures practiced by mostly by developing countries. Now, otherwise like mining, office machineries, communication related product are actually facilitated across the globe, and which is not restricted. And this is especially SPS related measures. We will also discuss these details in our SPS class in the next day. Today we are emphasizing on purely on non-tariff by types. TBTs measures are largely followed. TBTs are actually taken in almost all the products, but majorly again on oil and fats, motor vehicles, then animal products, food products, etc. Paper, metal, basic metals are actually attaching less TBT measures, whereas quantity or price measures are concerned or export measures are concerned. We are comparing these two. Quantity or price measures, I already said, quantity related productions or dumping related price practices. The countries like are more practicing on animal products, food products, vegetable products, petroleum products. Whereas in case of export measures, 4 indicators, again 4 to 5 indicators like oil and fats in almost all the categories we have observed, animal products, vegetable products, food products and petroleum products, where export related measures have also been given. So, basically subsidies are given in these sectors. Now, look at the kind of non-tariff measures and their relative intensity across countries in 2017. So, we can intensity, so far as the relative intensity is concerned. So, whoever is more than average is highlighted in deep shaded color. So, these are intensity is very high. In some Latin American countries also the intensity is very high, and China is among the highest. So, intensity of those technical non-tariff measures are much higher in practice by China. So, similarly, what are the export controls, export subsidies, other export incentive, tax based export incentive, trade related finance, export ban, export licensing requirement, export quota, export taxes, export related non-tariff measures, etc., are part of export subsidies. Now, so far as import quotas are concerned, which I have already discussed as part of import controls, we will discuss these diagrams, these other indicators in our import quota, basically how much quota to be restricted, we will discuss in detail in our next lecture. And here I think I need not stress much. So, what I wanted to say that we will take off all those things in our next class, dumping in detail, export subsidy also in detail. So, in short, we have discussed various facts of non-tariff defense measures or various restrictions measures by different countries, by sectors or at different period of time. Also, we also emphasize different types of non-tariff barriers characterized by WTO. So, in the next class we will clarify the impacts or effects of those impacts, some of those impacts. I think it is understood to you. I should stop here. Thank you.